Welcome to your deep dive.
Yes.
Today, we're going to be diving into a whole bunch of Kenyan news, pulling from a bunch of articles that were all published on November 17th, 2024, just yesterday.
Wow.
So get ready for politics and religion, business, and even a little bit of agricultural innovation.
Sounds fascinating.
I'm ready. Yeah. So we'll be extracting all the key events and the trends that are shaping Kenya as we speak.
Okay.
And helping you connect the dots between what might seem like some pretty different stories.
Yeah, because when you look at the big picture, it all kind of comes together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So think of this as your
Yeah.
cheat sheet to understanding what's really going on in Kenya, with maybe just a sprinkle of the unexpected,
Okay.
just to keep things interesting.
I like it.
All right, let's dive in. Let's start with the political landscape. Things seem to be heating up,
Yeah.
especially between President Ruto and a few different groups, who are some pretty prominent people.
Yeah, some big names. So, like, for instance, the Catholic bishops, they came out with a pretty strongly worded statement criticizing Ruto's administration.
Yeah, they didn't hold back. They accused them of,
Yeah,
what do they call it?
a culture of lies.
The culture of lies, yeah.
Yeah.
And also said that they're trying to silence their critics.
Yeah, and that's really significant because, historically, the church in Kenya has had a lot of political influence.
Yeah.
And remember, Ruto, really leaned on that religious support during his campaign, even portrayed himself as,
Oh, yeah.
this God-sent leader.
Right, yeah. So to see this rift kind of forming now with, public dissatisfaction with taxes and corruption, it's kind of a big deal.
It's a big deal. I mean, you got to think, the 2027 elections are coming up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just the bishops either.
No, not at all.
Former Deputy President Kachagwa, who Ruto ousted,
Right.
he's also adding to this, urging respect for the clergy and claiming that the government's actually using chiefs and police
Wow.
to monitor sermons.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Monitoring sermons.
I mean, I know things are tense, but that seems a little extreme.
Yeah, but it shows you how sensitive this whole situation is.
Yeah.
And, at the same time, we're seeing Ruto making these calculated moves to try and solidify support in Western Kenya,
Right.
which has traditionally been Raila Odinga's stronghold.
Yeah, Raila's territory.
Yeah.
Classic political maneuvering.
Classic. But speaking of Raila,
Right.
there's some drama unfolding on the opposition side, too.
Oh, that's right.
Eugene Wamalwa, the DAPK party leader, he's calling out Raila, accusing him of hypocrisy.
Oh, this is juicy.
Yeah. So Raila's been criticizing members of parliament, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, he's collaborating with Ruto's administration.
So Wama was saying he's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Exactly, playing both sides.
It really paints a picture of a political landscape that is very fluid, complex, constantly changing.
Totally. And don't forget, all this is happening with this upcoming cabinet reshuffle looming over everything.
Oh, that's right.
Ruto's hinted that it's going to make his government more broad-based.
Right.
Yeah.
More broad-based. Who knows what surprises that might bring.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and
Okay.
talk about the economy. What did our sources have to say about how everyday Kenyans are doing right now?
Well, it sounds like things are tough.
Yeah.
The Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union, the KMPDU,
Okay.
they're threatening a nationwide strike
Uh-oh.
over unpaid salaries and agreements that haven't been met.
That's a big deal. A doctor's strike would be disastrous.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just healthcare workers feeling the pressure. There's this proposed bill that could leave tea farmers really vulnerable
Vulnerable
to
to
the fluctuations in global tea prices. Right now, they have this dedicated fund that helps stabilize the prices.
Okay.
But this bill wants to shift that responsibility to the national budget.
So basically their income could be drastically affected by things that are completely out of their control.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got bank CEOs being summoned by regulators to explain these high interest rates on loans. And at the same time, they're giving these really low returns on savings.
A double whammy.
Yeah.
So what is the government doing to address all of these economic concerns?
Well, President Ruto has promised to review the Universal Health Coverage Program, the UHC,
Okay.
in response to all the public pressure. And, the Catholic bishops were pretty vocal about that, too.
Right.
And he's been highlighting, progress that they're making on housing and education initiatives.
Sure. But are those efforts actually enough to, really alleviate the economic pressures that people are feeling? That's the question.
It is a question, and only time will tell how effective these initiatives actually are. But one thing is clear. Kenyans are really struggling, and they're looking to the government for solutions.
And quickly, I hope, okay, I have to admit, this deep dive is getting a bit heavy. We need some good news. What have you got for me?
Don't worry, don't worry. There are some glimmers of hope. Like Kenya just signed this amazing deal with Italy.
Oh, yeah.
It gives them access to a $5.5 billion fund.
Wow.
Dedicated to supporting climate resilience and sustainable development projects all across Africa.
The $5.5 billion, that's huge.
Big boost for Kenya and, the whole continent, really.
Amazing.
And how about this? Stand-up comedy is having a moment in Kenya.
Really?
Yeah, new venues popping up,
Okay.
and this fresh wave of comedic talent is drawing huge crowds in Nairobi and beyond.
I love that. It seems like Kenyans are finding some much-needed comedic relief from all this, turbulence. Laughter truly is the best medicine.
Couldn't agree more. And one last potentially good piece of news, although it might seem a bit random. Researchers are advocating for Kenya to grow more sugar beets
Sugar beets.
as an alternative to sugarcane for sugar production.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked about land grabs, corruption,
Yeah.
premature births, the GMO debate, stand-up comedy, sugar beets. It's amazing how much is happening in Kenya right now.
It's a dynamic place, that's for sure. Lots of contrasts, lots of complexities.
Yeah.
And we've still got more fascinating stories to unpack.
Okay, let's do it.
You ready for the next part of our Kenyan deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's keep going.
All right, let's dive back in. It really is. It's a nation buzzing with activity, full of contrasts and complexities.
Absolutely. It's like each piece, even like the sugar beets, contributes to the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Speaking of unexpected pieces, you mentioned a story earlier about a prophetess who was laid to rest in Kawangware.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like there was more to it than just a funeral.
Right. So this was Prophetess Dorcas Mary Sinaida Akatsa,
Yep.
the founder of the Jerusalem of Christ Church.
Okay.
And yeah, her funeral is a big event, but it wasn't just about mourning.
So what was the story there? What made it so unusual?
Well, it sounds like there were all these rumors flying around that people were eyeing the land where her church is.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe hoping to, capitalize on the situation.
So they saw an opportunity with her passing to potentially grab some valuable land.
Exactly. But the church leaders, they were smart. They decided to bury her right there on the church grounds in a tomb.
Wow. So it was a way of
Yeah.
this land is spoken for. It belongs to the church.
Exactly. Hands off.
Wow. That's a pretty bold move.
It is. But it really highlights how important land is in Kenya. Land ownership is often a huge source of conflict and tension.
Especially in urban areas like Nairobi where space is so limited.
Exactly. So it's fascinating to see how these issues, they even play out in matters of death and burial.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these deep-seated issues, they don't just disappear.
Nope.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, what about that story you mentioned about the woman who's seeking marriage with some, shall we say, unconventional requests?
Oh, yeah. That was a fascinating one. So she's basically looking for an open relationship.
An open relationship?
Yeah, where both she and her husband would be free to see other people.
Wow. That's pretty different from what's considered traditional in Kenya.
Right. It really goes against the norm. And it definitely presents some challenges, The article said her demands have scared off a lot of potential suitors.
I can imagine. So do we know if she's found anyone willing to accept those terms?
It's hard to say, but she did mention that she's not willing to compromise on what she wants. She wants to live life on her own terms, even if it makes finding a partner more difficult.
It's like individual choice versus societal expectations.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we can circle back to the topic of economic realities for a moment.
Yeah.
One of the articles talked about residents in Nairobi protesting because this wealthy tycoon had allegedly seized land
Oh, right.
that belonged to a police station.
Yeah, pretty brazen, right?
Seizing land from the police. That's bold.
It seems that way. The residents were accusing him of basically trying to take their public land.
Land that was meant for a police station.
Right. So, again, it goes back to that issue of power imbalances and land ownership that we were talking about earlier.
It's like a classic case of, the rich and powerful taking advantage of the system.
Yeah, unfortunately. And that wasn't the only story about alleged wrongdoing. There was another one about this guy who got arrested for allegedly masterminding this scheme that defrauded the government.
Oh, wow.
A ton of money, like
Yeah.
over 125 million shillings.
125 million shillings.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money. What happened to him?
Well, as part of the investigation, the courts froze his entire fortune.
Ouch.
Right. But it's good to see that action is being taken against corruption like that.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, there was another report about these 3 companies that were banned from getting government contracts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen.
What did they do?
Well, they were each involved in these separate incidents, either negligence or just outright wrongdoing,
Okay.
that ended up costing the government money or causing damage. So they've been barred from bidding on any government tenders for the next 3 years.
3 years. That's a pretty serious penalty.
It is. It sends a message, right?
Yeah, that they're serious about cracking down on this stuff.
Yeah. But, like we've been saying, corruption is deeply rooted. It's going to take more than just punishing a few companies to really fix the problem.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered land grabs, corruption, evolving social norms, unconventional marriage requests. Is there anything else in these articles that you found particularly, I don't know, striking or thought-provoking?
You know, there was this one article that was kind of different from all the others. It was about the Friends of Nairobi National Park.
Okay.
They recently launched this photography contest.
A photography contest. That sounds fun.
It was all about celebrating the beauty of the park and raising awareness about conservation. You know, Nairobi National Park is pretty unique. It's right on the edge of the city.
Wow, I've always wanted to visit.
It's amazing. You can be watching lions and giraffes with skyscrapers in the background.
That's incredible.
It is. But the article also talked about the challenges the park is facing, especially from development projects like the Standard Gauge Railway that are kind of encroaching on its boundaries.
Yeah, the classic tension between development and conservation.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. It reminds us that even amidst all the hustle and bustle of a growing city, we need to protect these natural spaces.
Absolutely. Did the article mention anything about the winners?
It did. They got vacations to different wildlife destinations all over Kenya.
Oh, wow. Like where?
Like the Masai Mara, the Meru Conservancy, places like that.
What an amazing prize.
Right.
Okay, so before we move on, I want to hear about this story about the twin boys, Elijah and Kina.
Oh, yes.
I know they were born prematurely.
Yeah, at 33 weeks.
Premature births can be so tough on families.
Oh, absolutely. Their mother, Elizabeth, had a really difficult pregnancy. The article talked about bed rest, cervical sutures, all that.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It was. But thankfully, the twins got incredible care at the neonatal intensive care unit at Mediheal Hospital in Eldoret.
Okay, it's good to hear.
Yeah, they even benefited from kangaroo care.
Kangaroo care?
Yeah, you know, where they hold the baby skin to skin.
Oh, right. I've heard that can be so helpful for premature babies.
It really is. Helps regulate their body temperature, promotes bonding, all that.
So simple, yet so powerful.
Exactly. And for Elijah and Kina, it seems to have made a big difference. They're 3 years old now and doing great.
Ah, that's wonderful to hear.
It is.
But their story really highlights how important it is to have access to quality neonatal care.
Absolutely. Especially in a place like Kenya, where prematurity is one of the leading causes of newborn deaths.
Right. So the article, it emphasized the role of healthcare professionals, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
But it also talked about how important family support is.
Yeah, especially from fathers. Elizabeth's husband was really there for her, helping her through those early days. It really does take a village.
It does. It's a beautiful reminder of, like, the power of love and support in overcoming adversity.
Absolutely. And, you know, the article also touched on the fact that advancements in neonatal care have really improved the survival rates of premature babies.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Yeah, even for babies born with very low birth weights.
It sounds like Kenya's making progress.
They are, but there's always more work to do.
Of course.
Now, before we move on, I wanted to touch on another topic that's been getting a lot of attention in Kenya recently, GMOs.
Oh, yeah, the GMO debate. It always seems to be a hot topic.
It is. So one of the articles talked about the National Biosafety Authority's efforts to reassure Kenyans about the safety of GMO products in the country.
Okay. This is after that recent High Court decision, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The one that dismissed a case against lifting the GMO ban.
So, just to be clear, GMOs are now officially legal in Kenya.
They are. The ban was actually lifted back in 2022, but this recent court ruling really solidified it.
And what's the National Biosafety Authority doing to address the concerns that people still have?
Well, they're really focusing on public education and transparency. They're emphasizing that Kenya has a strong legal and institutional framework to regulate GMOs.
So they're saying, trust us, we've got this.
Basically. And they're pointing to the successful cultivation of Brit cotton in Kenya since 2020 as an example.
Okay.
And they're also highlighting the fact that variety testing for other GMO crops like brute maize and virus-resistant cassava is in its advanced stages, and they're close to commercialization.
It sounds like they're at least trying to be transparent.
Transparency is key for sure.
Okay, so in this segment, we've talked about land disputes, corruption, premature births, the GMO debate. It's really amazing how much is going on.
It really is. And we've still got a few more stories to go, ready for the final part of our Kenyan deep dive.
Let's do it. I'm ready. It really is amazing how all these different stories come together, from politics to personal stories. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to do here with these deep dives, right? Connect all those dots and help you see the bigger picture.
Speaking of connections, you mentioned earlier that sugar beet cultivation could be a turning point for Kenya's economy.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. We talked about the struggles that tea farmers are going through and that ongoing sugar shortage. So what if Kenya could actually use that Mate plan for climate resilience and combine it with new agricultural ideas like growing more sugar beets?
Yeah, it could help create a more diverse and resilient agricultural industry, one that's less dependent on just a few crops that are vulnerable to things like global markets and climate change.
Right. It just shows that sometimes solutions can come from the most unexpected places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll all be drinking our tea with sugar from Kenyan-grown sugar beets.
Maybe.
But for now, let's get back to our articles. There are a few stories we haven't gotten to yet.
Oh, you're right. There was that one about the mass wedding for police officers.
Oh, yeah. 84 officers,
Yeah.
all tying the knot at the same time.
84 couples. And it was overseen by Pastor Dorcas Rigathi, the Second Lady of Kenya.
Wow. That's a lot of weddings.
It was actually the second round of police weddings that she sponsored.
That's quite a commitment. What inspired her to do that?
It's not totally clear from the article, but it seems like she's really dedicated to supporting the police force and just promoting marriage in general.
It definitely would make for a memorable wedding day. What else do we have?
Well, there was that story about the interruption during Governor Sakaja's speech at the church.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What happened there?
Apparently, this woman started wailing really loudly in the middle of his speech. He had to stop and try to calm things down.
I wonder what was going on.
The article didn't say what her issue was, but it definitely shows you that you never know what's going to happen at a live event.
Yeah, you have to be ready for anything. It sounds like Governor Sakaja handled it pretty well. So before we wrap up this deep dive, was there anything else from these articles that really stood out to you?
I keep thinking about that woman who was looking for an open marriage. It really got me thinking about how societal norms are changing and how hard it can be to balance what you want as an individual with what society expects of you.
Yeah, it was a really interesting look at how relationships are evolving in Kenya. It makes you realize that society is always changing, and things that were once taboo are becoming more accepted, or at least more openly discussed.
Exactly. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our Kenyan News Roundup.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. From political tensions and the economy to heartwarming stories of resilience and how Kenyan society is changing. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and it's been great exploring it all with you. We hope you learned something new about what's happening in Kenya today.
And maybe it even made you curious to learn more. Remember, staying informed is so important, especially in a world that's constantly changing.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.